Hey everybody, Ketwolski here, checking in with another one of our hashtag Star Trek Picard discussions videos. So today what we're going to be doing is kind of going over quite a few of the very common complaints, issues, and confusions that people had in regards to Star Trek Picard Episode 1, titled Remembrance. There seems to be kind of a running theme of people who are confused about very key specific things. So I wanted to kind of go ahead and provide a response to some of you guys and maybe give you some clarification so that hopefully it clears up some confusion. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So the first one, and this is honestly probably the most commented thing that I saw on my video and across Twitter and many other videos that were posted up on YouTube, was the whole they cloned data from his DNA thing. And I think that this was kind of stated in someone else's kind of review video, and this rumor of it being DNA has kind of been sent out there into the cosmos of the internet, and people are rather confused by it. And they did use the word cloning inside of the episode, but if you really listen to the dialogue, that's clearly not what they're talking about. They're not talking about DNA dialogue. So at 39 minutes and 39 seconds in the episode, Agnes talks about fractal neuronic cloning, not literal cloning of Data's actual DNA, because he doesn't actually have some. I know some people say that, well, he got it from the Borg Queen. Well, most of that got burnt off when they punctured the plasma cooling tank and started First Contact, so I don't think he still has that. So they're not talking about actual DNA. But they are talking about a theory that Maddox, the guy from Measure of a Man, had, that Data's entire code and all of his memories could be extracted from a single positronic neuron from his neural net, just like the neural net that he downloaded into B4 towards the end of Star Trek Nemesis before he sacrifices himself. So it's not cloning of DNA, it's more like decompressing a zipped file of data stuck inside of it, and that Maddox is attempting to extract all of Data's, essentially his essence, as they say in the episode, from that single positronic neuron. It's not a literal physical DNA device, and they even allude to this kind of positronic neuron thing during the title sequence, where they have these two shapes, these little cube things kind of separating and then turning into DNA strands. So that's clearly what they're kind of getting across here. It's not literal DNA. Another thing that people talk about is that the boyfriend of Daj should not have died so quickly, or maybe possibly being saved, because they saved Picard from being stabbed through the heart way back in the earlier, years of Star Trek. We saw that kind of as a flashback inside of TNG. So they're like, well, what the hell? Why did this guy die? Well, this guy is not human. He's Zahian, who is actually the same race as Poe from Star Trek Discovery, which I thought was a nice subtle reference to Discovery without being too overpowering, because I don't think a lot of people noticed that. But we don't know anything about what's going on internally with their anatomy, so we have no idea what that knife found and hit, or we don't know if that knife was laced with poison in order to quickly kill other targets. These Romulan guys are clearly very, very effective at killing people and trying to kidnap them, so it's likely that they didn't want to utilize their blasters because that would have made too much sound, I'm assuming. So they just threw a knife at him real fast and then quickly went after Dodge. So I really wouldn't get yourself wrapped around the axle too much on that. The other thing here, and there's going to be a couple of things here during the interview with Picard and the interview lady from the news about what happened and why it is that he retired in Starfleet. One of the things that she said here is that there were 900 Romulan citizens that needed to be evacuated. And a lot of people took that as there was only 900 million Romulans in the entire Empire. And that's not what she said. So you got to really pay attention to two key portions of the dialogue. The first one happens at 1339, where Picard corrects the interview lady when she says that they were only out there to save Romulan lives, and he reminds her that there are more than just Romulans out there that needed to be saved. And we're actually seeing that, sentient life forms, seeing that during the Countdown comics, so if you're reading those, you kind of already knew what he was talking about. And then at 1348, she states the mission was used to relocate 900 Romulan citizens, not relocate every single Romulan. She's talking about the blast zone, people in the blast zone of the supernova's effects. They're not saying that there's only 900 million Romulans in the Empire. That would be ridiculous, and that's not what she's saying at all. So I would definitely just try to make sure you're following along with some of that dialogue there. It definitely is confusing because of the way they're wording it, but as I said in my original review, she's wording these things and structuring these things in a way in order to get a rise out of Picard, because again, if you watch the sequence, this is supposedly his first interview since retiring from Starfleet, since he essentially quit Starfleet in protest over what Starfleet did and turning its back on the Romulans and helping them to evacuate from the supernova. This is is his first interview, so she's looking for the story. She wants the headline. She wants him to slip up. So she's baiting him into a confrontation. So she's saying these things in a way to try to get an emotional reaction out of him. And it's really, honestly, a well-written scene, but it is a little hard to follow, and I do understand that, but hopefully that clears that one up. Another one, again, about the Romulans, is that they apparently have acid blood and that they're spitting acid out and melting people because of how one of the Romulans supposedly killed Dahj towards the end of the episode. But let's watch that sequence again very carefully. So as you can see, he clearly goes like that, and he's cracking like an old school, cyanide pill that's in his mouth. Like old school spies used to have those pills in order to kill themselves, so in case they got captured, they wouldn't be tortured for information. This one goes even further because it's not only acid that he spits out, but also acid that he's using to melt his own being so that people would not identify him as a Romulan. That's clearly what that is used for. So I don't know how people missed that. Maybe it was just going a little bit too fast, but hopefully the slowed down version of him cracking that little thing or whatever it was that it was in his mouth, false tooth or whatever, is enough of a justification for people to understand that it wasn't his blood that he was spitting onto her. Another thing that I see getting passed around quite a bit is that the technology isn't advanced enough, which is kind of a funny thing to complain about because one of the larger complaints Discovery got was the technology was too advanced. So I think that they took the lessons they learned from Discovery and applied it very well to Picard. Remember, this show is only taking place 20 years after Star Trek Nemesis. So look at the technology in Star Trek Nemesis, which is relatively the same as it was inside of the Next Generation show, which is they have physical devices, they're touching things on LCARs. That's kind of the same style of technology that they have there. There's some holograms being tossed around. Shinzon uses a hologram when he beams himself into the Enterprise E to talk to Picard. But for the most part, the technology is about the same as it was in TNG. Now, in this show, we get actually several instances of a new holographic UI that people are using, including Dahj, but we are also still seeing physical pad devices with the traditional LCARs that have been slightly upgraded a little bit in design in order to, I guess you could say, show the passage of time that things have been refined slightly. But also at 2416, we get treated to the Quantum Museum Archive, which is this fantastical magical space facility that's keeping all sorts of data about everything, that's, anyone's data, I guess. Picard has his own giant little private room where he's recalling, paintings that get beamed into the room and that he's using that stuff. That is pretty high-tech stuff, so I'm not quite sure I understand this particular argument. I think that they did a fantastic job with blending newer technology that we, as today, would view as new technology while still keeping connections to Star Trek Nemesis, which is a very hard thing to do because they want to further this, because Star Trek has always furthered technology, but it always seemed somewhat attainable. But they had to kind of keep it still in line with Nemesis because it wasn't that far ahead into the future. So I understand that they made some mistakes with Discovery technology-wise. It was a little bit over the top, and there's some justifications to attach to that. But I get that people are upset about that, but to then lay that on to Picard because it's not advanced enough, I think is kind of just, I think just kind of a general complaint. But, your opinion is your opinion. Another big thing that I see is that there's no mention of lore or lol. Well, again, you kind of have to really pay attention and pick up these subtle cues of what's going on here. So at 40 minutes and 6 seconds, Picard says Data always wanted a daughter. This is a nod to lol for us longtime Star Trek fans. We know that that's what he is talking about. But it's also a setup for Data's motivations in creating a daughter of his own for those non-initiated Star Trek fans. Because if he comes out and says there was another daughter that he created way back in the day and that didn't work, that could potentially convolute the story a little bit too much. And we're already getting into some technobabble in this scene, so it may have been too much to specifically state there. I think him saying that Data always wanted a daughter was just the right amount of subtle reference that we all knew that they were still referencing lol's existence. Now, as for lore, you're talking about Maddox, the guy who wanted to rip apart Data just in the off chance he might be able to recreate Dr. Soong's life's work. If you think that he wasn't doing this whole positronic neuron replication thing that he supposedly did with Data on lore, I think that you are not really paying attention to how crazy this guy might be and how driven he is in regards to replicating Dr. Soong's androids. And we're also all assuming at this point that Data is the lineage father of Dahj and her sister Soji, but it could just as easily be lore. So we'll just put a pin in that for right now. We have 9 more episodes to get through. Something else is that the supposed location of the Romulan supernova has changed. Now, the interview lady talking to Picard says the Romulan sun, and people are saying, well, I thought it was supposed to be the Hobus sun that goes supernova. So we got to talk a little bit about this. The Hobus piece of the whole supernova plot came from the old school 2009 Star Trek Countdown comic. Now, Roberto Orci is the one who, in an interview, said that those comics were considered to be canon. And in that one, they talk about Hobus. However, Roberto did not have the authority to state that that would be alpha canon because Paramount was only making the movies. They only had the rights to make and create films, whereas CBS at the time was the entire IP owner. He did not have the authority to make that decision. However, myself and I think the large Star Trek community as a whole has accepted that it was the Hobus star that went supernova and destroyed part of Romulan space. Her line does not explicitly override the fact that it could be Hobus. I said in my original review that she is attempting to try to get this whole rise out of Picard, and by saying it's the Romulan sun means it was their problem, not ours. There's this whole concept of us as the Federation versus them as the Romulans, and this is the Romulans' issue, and we shouldn't have helped them. Picard and this lady have a huge argument about that during the interview, and he clearly had that huge argument with Starfleet leadership, potentially even the Federation president. So that is the story that they're trying to sell, that it's the Romulans' problem. And it very much could still be Hobus. I'm still considering it that way because they haven't explicitly come out and said anything either way at this particular point. So in my mind, it's still Hobus, but I don't think that it really particularly matters all that much at this point. The intention being here, the focus here, is that we as the Federation abandon them regardless of where the supernova was originating from. So I don't think it was a mishap. I think it was written in a way to try to get a rise out of him, but that's my personal opinion on that. Another thing that people are commenting, obviously way across the board, is that the show itself is too political. And for me, at 13 minutes and 18 seconds, the interview lady again says that many thought spending resources on helping the Romulans was a bad idea. This, to me, was the peak moment of the political undertone within the episode. She's clearly talking about some more common day, political situations where it's like, let's just worry about ourselves and stop worrying about other people. We have a lot of that going around all over the globe, very isolationist, very us first, and forget about everybody else. That's a very common theme happening in today's politics and today's climate. So that to me is like the top peak level of the political commentary in this episode. But saying that, I don't think that that's any more of a political commentary than when Kirk and Spock were having a conversation about the Klingons in Undiscovered Country, where our hero, our main protagonist, Captain Kirk, just flat out says he wants the entire Klingon race to die because of what happened between him and his son being killed by a Klingon and his long history of battling the Klingons. He just flat out says, let them die. I don't think that this interview discussion is any more politically charged than essentially all of Undiscovered Country, but specifically that scene where he says to Spock to just let the Klingons die. I don't think it's anything more than that. The final thing that I do want to talk about is Picard seems old and depressed. That's literally the point that they're trying to get across. He's supposed to be old and depressed, and Sir Patrick plays this just perfectly. In fact, at 9 minutes and 54 seconds, he literally says that the dreams and being in height of his mind is something that he enjoys. It's the waking up and being alive part that he's starting to resent. He's clearly saying he wants to die. He even goes as far as to say those specific words later on at 35:46, where he says, I've only been sitting here waiting to die. That's what he's talking about. He's just been wasting away because he's been nursing his dignity, because he feels bad about the fact that they abandoned the Romulans, and he's just been sitting there wasting away. And this whole situation with Dutch has reignited that adventurous Captain Picard spirit. This whole episode was to reignite the person of Jean-Luc Picard back into who you remember he was 20 years prior when we saw him last at the end of Star Trek Nemesis. That was the whole point of his character arc in this particular episode, and it's probably going to continue on throughout the rest of the season. So I'm not quite sure why people are saying that as a negative. I guess it was so perfectly acted by Patrick Stewart that people just got confused. They thought that it was just him being an older gentleman, that he can't get moving around, and that they're just building this depressing story around him. That was the point of the story. It was to showcase that he is a bit older and he's trying to then get back into the game, and this is what shocks him back into life. That was the point. Okay, everybody, that does kind of wrap up my video here. Hopefully this clears up some of the confusion and some of the issues that some of you guys had, some maybe bad information that some of you guys had. I know there were other questions and concerns about the episode as a whole, but these were kind of the top ones that I saw a lot of comments on, not just on my video, but on other videos and all across the internet. So hopefully this clears a couple of things up for you guys and gals, and then maybe you can use this video as a reference tool to pass along to people that also are stating these things incorrectly or just as confused, so that way they can kind of maybe get some more information and hopefully increase their enjoyment of the episode. Anyways, that does wrap it up. So I hope that you guys and gals enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought about some of these corrections that I put forth, what other ideas that you may have, and what were some of the other issues that you noticed that people are saying but wanted to clear up yourself. Get that up down in the comments down below, and we'll go ahead and get the conversation started. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies!